Hello, Neural Network listeners. This is your host, Arman Priyadarshan. Today, we're joined by Dr. Umar Iqbal, Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Washington University in St. Louis.
Dr. Iqbal, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Omar, and I am an assistant professor in the McKelvey School of Engineering in the Computer Science and Engineering Department. I research computer security and privacy, and I focus on the security of emerging technologies. Currently, we have generative AI based systems, so I'm like analyzing their security properties. Other than that, I am interested in studying web security and privacy topics. So a lot of my research has analyzed how users are tracked on the internet and what can be done to protect against pervasive online tracking. I'm also interested in analyzing and assessing whether and how policy-based solutions like laws and regulations can help improve security and privacy on the internet.
Mhm. Could you go over what motivated you to pursue your current research interests?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say research is kind of like an acquired taste. So you have to like understand the things in sufficient detail to truly figure out if that's something that you like doing. So in my case, I happen to be in security. So for me, it's more important to study different problems and understand, basically explore what new technologies we can build and how can we use technologies to solve different problems. And I just happen to be in security.
Cool. In your research in privacy, security, and CS, what do you say is the project that you're the most proud of?
Okay. I think in a way I'm like proud of most of my projects. Uh, uh, because I think in research you have to like what you're doing. So if you don't like what
Yep.
you're doing, then if you're just doing it as part of your job, like in a 9 to 5 routine, it doesn't really make sense.
Mhm.
But I do have some favorites. So one of my papers analyzed a covert tracking technology called browser fingerprinting. So typically, when users go on the internet, they are tracked with a technology called cookies. So
Mhm.
Yep.
the idea is that a resource on a web page or a service on a web page, like an advertising service, would set a cookie. And then as users are visiting different websites, these cookies, which are deterministic values stored in the browser, would keep on tracking um, the user's browsing history as they browse the web. Uh, so, um, and as you can imagine that this is something stored at the client side, it's something that can be removed. So browsers do provide tools to eliminate these cookies. And a few years ago, a lot of prominent browsers like Safari and Firefox, they started removing third-party cookies. So as an alternative, trackers tried to create identifiers in the browser that do not required to be stored. So essentially, the idea is that if you capture a lot of properties of the user's browser and their devices, you can combine them together to create a fingerprint which will be very unique to the user.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So in my research, what I did was that we did program analysis. Typically, it is, I think the technical term for program analysis is static analysis and dynamic analysis. So we did both of that, which in layman terms is understanding the functionality of the code and
Mhm.
putting it in a representation, um, which we can leverage to better understand the functionalities or the execution of a program. So we did that and then tried to like learn some patterns with machine learning algorithms and detected browser fingerprinting on a large set of websites.
Mhm. And then regarding your analysis of cookies, do you think that I know like from my personal experience, whenever it asks me like, would you like to have cookies on this website, I always click yes. Do you think that users should focus more on whether they click yes or not, or you think that overall it's not the biggest negative?
So I think it's an important point, and it has to do with user autonomy.
Hmm.
So users definitely should have an autonomy to make a decision about how and when they want their information to be tracked.
Yeah.
Maybe people like the benefits enabled by online tracking. For example, if they see relevant targeted ads, maybe it's better than not seeing advertising. So
Hmm.
from that perspective, having controls is important. But a key problem is that the controls that we have right now are very bloated. Uh,
Hmm.
and they are uh, formed in a way that they're very difficult for users who are not tech savvy to understand. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you see a cookie banner, it would have a bunch of different values, which will have arbitrary random names. So there's no way for a user to figure out what is that information and how that information might impact them. So that's why we are seeing a lot of cases where users just accept or deny these burdens without realizing their impact.
Hmm.
But from a broader perspective, these controls are really important. And I say that because they are in many jurisdictions backed by regulations. For example, in California, there is a California Consumer Privacy Act,
Yeah. We actually had a question
which
about that after.
has, right. So under this law, cookie banners like accepting and denying, it has a very specific meaning. So
Hmm.
let's say if a user accepts or rejects these banners, and the companies who have these banners, if they don't respect user consent, they can be prosecuted.
Hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you touched on the California policy itself. I know that one thing that's been on the news like recently and over like the past year is the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, I believe, from 1996, which is about like big tech and their control over data. I was wondering if you think like the vast majority of like policy regarding data controls is like very outdated, and do you think that in the future we'll start to see like more advancements with specific policies that are more updated?
Yeah, I think you're right. There are a lot of policies which are quite old and they may not be sufficient in governing the existing computing platforms and systems. That's why a lot of new laws are being created. For example, CCPA, it's a pretty recent law. I think it got approved a few years ago, so it's a pretty recent thing. It's not from 1996, and it is like well suited to address a lot of modern problems that exist in existing online computing systems.
What do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of security and privacy in technology today?
I guess the importance of privacy. It's not entirely obvious at times to many users that what do they lose by not having privacy on the internet. Um, I can give you a few examples. So, um, a lot of data that is tracked on the internet is actually being sold. A lot of it is used for online advertising purposes, but a lot of it is sold. So let's say if you are interested in purchasing information on any individual user that you know, you can just go on the internet, pay a few dollars, and get their information. So it just shows you the serious risks in the real world that the lack of privacy might pose to many users.
Would you say you have like any advice for like the typical like not really necessarily tech savvy user on better protecting their privacy?
I think the most obvious one is using privacy enhancing tools like ad and tracker blockers, denying most cookie notices on the internet. So that would result in a better security and privacy situation for many, many users. And of
Hmm.
course, there are like other complicated things you can do. You can use uh, anonymity browsers like Tor. So, but it like also like degrades user experience. So you have to like strike that balance somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that something else that I've heard about with privacy is VPNs. Could you kind of explain like what like VPNs are and like their role inside privacy today?
So VPNs, you can think of it as mechanisms to mask your internet traffic. So
Hmm.
let's say if I go to certain websites on the internet right now, they would know my IP address and they would be able to see, oh, where is this traffic coming from.
Yeah.
So let's say if you want to hide that, you can use a VPN. So what happens in a VPN is that your request first goes to an intermediate device, and that intermediate device makes a request on your behalf to the server. So the server doesn't know who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah.
You mentioned this a little bit before, but how do you see the role of emerging technologies like large language models, generative AI, and IoT affecting user privacy?
So, one of the obvious things is that these technologies collect a lot of data, and once they have more data, it means that they're able to infer more things about the users, and they can leverage that information for a variety of other purposes. So essentially, it is similar to tracking that happens on the internet currently, but on steroids.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that something else with like kind of the ideology of like large language models that's been like enacted for a while now is like echo chambers in the sense that users get fed content that they mainly resonate with. Do you think that there are like algorithms or like research being conducted right now that kind of decreases the strength of these echo chambers and might help with sharing different perspectives to users?
Right. So there are a lot of broad directions that are being explored. You
Mhm.
might have heard of alignment. So the idea is that LLMs should align to a set of rules, and if they're able to do that, they would avoid a lot of problems, which might include echo chambers and some of the other stuff. So
Mhm.
I see that direction as being a promising pursuit in solving a lot of these problems.
Yeah. Also, like, I know, like, when I've used ChatGPT before, like, at this point, it kind of like knows like some. I saw this LinkedIn post that asked like ChatGPT name like three things about me that I might not know that you know, and it named some pretty like crazy things. So I guess like, would you have anything to share about what kind of data these language models are collecting as of now?
So these language models are very big, complicated programs. So they have a bunch of data, essentially everything that's out there on the internet. So they know many things about the users. But in recent prominent development, especially in these um, live AI platforms like ChatGPT, is that they are maintaining memory now. So essentially, all your interactions or some of your interactions are getting stored in the memory. So when LLMs are responding back to the users, they're not just using data on which they have been trained on, but they're also leveraging the user-specific data that they have in their memory. So that increases the risks of echo chambers and some of the other things some of the other harms that can happen.
And another thing is that like sometimes like I also enter stuff into ChatGPT and then like, almost like weirdly like when somebody else is asking it a question, it'll answer like a response that was similar to mine. Like I don't know if I'm just like hallucinating, but like do you think that GPT also like it takes inputs from users and uses that as training data in almost close to real time? Or is that just a little bit of a crazy theory?
So you mean people are seeing similar responses?
Yeah, I mean like there's stuff that I enter in. Like for example, like when we're like when writing like an essay, there's like stuff that I enter in that when I was asking GPT for like a response on, it didn't give me anything. But then when somebody else asks like a question about like a similar kind of essay, they get something that's similar to my response, which I thought that was kind of funny.
Right. So these models are taking in user information and they are using that information in their training process. So when
Mhm.
new models are going to be released or updates are going to be models, they may use that information while responding to other users. So it might be the case that the answers you are curating might result as responses to other users in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about.
I know that there's been like in the last like probably 2 years, there's been a lot more talk about artificial intelligence in general. I was wondering if you would imagine that when we kind of move forward, if policy is going to be taking place at more of a national level or probably a state level, because I know you were talking about the California law that took place, and I was wondering what your perspective on like policy and governing AI will be.
I'm not sure. I think there could be national policies. So
Hmm.
what it would mean is that the policies are consistent for all the states. So people would enjoy the same benefits regardless of where they live.
Hmm.
But another benefit is that some states might be more progressive than the others. They might
Yeah.
have more appropriate regulations as compared to the others who may not be that willing. So um, that may have an impact that the states where there are less powerful regulations, the platforms might just adjust themselves to adhere to the most stricter ones. So essentially, there could be downstream benefits.
Yeah. And now we have like a couple more fun questions. Outside of your academic work, what would you say are your favorite hobbies or interests?
I like to run. I have been running a lot. So yeah, so running is my main thing. Other than that, as an academic, you also travel a lot. So I've been traveling
Mhm.
frequently in the last few months.
Hmm. If you could instantly become an expert in any one area outside your current field, what would it be and why?
Probably robotics.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's a new and emerging area. Well, it has existed for a very, very long time, but I think with the recent developments in language models, there are going to be a lot of very cool things that will appear in the next few years. So I think it's a very good time to be in that area.
Yeah, I actually like have done like a project on like companion robots. So I developed a little like Raspberry Pi robot with like a face display, and then I used like a language model to provide like dialogue with the user. And actually, our last guest also like talked a little bit about how like AI can combat loneliness and how like robotics and more physical presences can kind of play into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the possibilities are endless. And I think the good thing is that you don't have to have physical robots because virtually there's a bunch of different things that can
Yeah.
happen. For example, a lot of agents are appearing on the internet. They're running in this, or they're interacting with other agents. So you can imagine an internet of agents in the future,
Mhm.
doing a bunch of different interesting things.
Hmm.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then for a quick final question, what drew you to WashU and how has your experience been so far?
So Washoe is an amazing place to conduct research. It has a lot of excellent students and a lot of opportunities to do great research. So these were
Mhm.
the core reasons that drew me, and I've been like enjoying it. It's my second year at Washoe,
Mhm.
but the experience has been phenomenal.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah. We're actually like both, or at least I'm applying to wash you as well. So like learning any other information is like awesome.
Mhm.
So it's great to hear that's a school you like.
Great. Good luck with the admissions.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Neural Network listeners, for listening to our podcast. That is Vasu, Arman, and Dr. Iqbal signing out.